Okay, we are live. Yet another ask me, not us anything. Anything you want. Simply we have no guests this week. Today it's me, only me, nobody else. So if you're first time here, here's the introduction how this all works. You ask questions, I answer. Sometimes answers are I have no idea. Sometimes I know. And in any case, you can ask anything you want. So that this is your opportunity to ask whatever you wanted to ask, ever, and get a silly answer often. Anyways, so no script prepared. I'm going to try to answer all your questions for first come, first served. And the first one comes from Kirill, I think. What MCPs do you recommend for us of today with Cloud Code? That depends what you're doing. Let me first say which tools I don't recommend. I don't recommend MCP like for Git operations. Actually, let me backtrack for a second. There is a difference between running MCP locally and running it in a server, right? Remotely for a whole company or team or what's not. If you're running it remotely, then that server where MCP is running either has the tools that you need to do something or it doesn't. If it doesn't, then you need MCP to enable. Like if there is no GitHub CLI on that remote server, you need the MCP or you need to install GitHub. Now, more importantly is I feel for local MCP running, which is what most people do, probably mistakenly, but they do. And in that case, the MCPs you should not install are MCPs that basically do the same thing as what CLIs do. Like, I see no reason why you would use Git MCP, right? Because your agent, together with the model it's connected to, is perfectly capable of performing Git operations using Git CLI. Same thing for GitHub. Same thing for Kubernetes, for example, right? I haven't seen real benefits of, there are probably many Kubernetes MCPs, but I'm now referring to Kubernetes MCP, for example, that performs more or less the same operations, give you the same tools as what you could do with kubectl. You don't need that because agents together with models are perfectly capable of executing whatever is executable in your terminal. Git GH for GitHub, kubectl, I don't know, Node, and so on and so forth. So focus on MCPs that are giving truly value, right? A good one would be, for example, Playwright. Playwright allows you to open headless browser inside and enable AI to take a screenshot, for example, of the front end you're working on so that it can analyze and see what it did wrong, right? Or to test whether what it did works, right? So Playwright, great example of something that is not easily doable without MCPs, right? Now, which exact MCPs you should use, that depends on what you're doing, right? It will depends what you're working on, what you're developing, the languages, what's not. Just don't use MCPs that are mimicking and performing the same tasks as what can be done without them, which is probably 98% of MCPs altogether. Okay, the next one from Tirindesa. Hey guys, really enjoy your video. So thank you. Could you elaborate a bit more why you prefer CLI instead of ID for AI agents? I'm used to ID, so I need a reason to change. There are two answers to that questions, or two reasons, at least in my head. First of all is which agent is most capable, and let's say the best, independently of whether it is which agent that is, independently of whether it is baked into an ID or a terminal and so on and so forth, right? And in my experience so far, the best agent, without doubt, is simply Cloud Code. It's absolutely amazing. Everything. There are maybe few things that are missing that others might have, but there are many, many more that are not available in others, or if they're available or in others, they came later. Like I believe that Cloud Code is the first one who created sub-agents. The way how it manages context is just amazing, and so on and so forth. So Cloud Code is, in my opinion, the best coding agent, independently of the format you prefer. The second answer is that, so first time I started using Cloud Code, I even published a video, I think, and my conclusion was, hey, this is great for operations, for things that we would normally do from a terminal, kube control something, but not necessarily for development. I still prefer Visual Studio Code with whichever agent or cursor and so on and so forth. That was my opinion back then. But then the more I started using it, the more I started liking it, partly because of what I said before, that I believe is the most capable agent right now, but partly because of the focus, right? Because like in Cursor, for example, okay, so Cursor, I don't know whether it changed recently, but at least back then when I used it, Cursor with its agent would, I don't know, do something and edit 5 files, right? And then I would go to those 5 files and say, okay, accept, oh, reject, and so on and so forth, right? Cloud Code works if it's unsupervised mode. Sorry, if it's supervised mode, meaning that you want to confirm changes. It shows you only the things it's working on, right? There are no destruction, right? Oh, I just changed this file. Do you like the change or no? Yes or no, right? Doesn't change 7 files at the same time and confuses the hell out of me. Doesn't go crazy. It is simply easier to focus for me when I'm working on it, right? I type instruction, it does something, it shows me what it's doing, and that's it. Nothing else. And I feel that makes me more productive, because then I focus literally and exclusively only on the outputs of agent's work based on my intent of what I instructed it to do. But different people, I'm not saying, kind of many people like IDEs, use IDEs, that's fine. I still think that Cloud Code is better in general, but there is nothing wrong with Cursor. I personally cannot imagine myself going back. And I feel also that, and this is happening a lot with AI, is that very few projects or vendors are trying to reimagine how we would work with AI, but are trying to put AI in existing box, right? So, we were developing before with IDEs. That must be what we should build AI on top. Oh, we were using this tool. We should build AI on top, and so on and so forth. Cloud Code, and that could be a third reason, maybe try to reimagine what would be the more effective way to interact with agents with the objective to do some software engineering. Okay, next one from Ribshot. I'm not sure whether I'm pronouncing your names correctly. Did you test agent frameworks such as ADK? I haven't. LangGraph, I have. I didn't like it. It's too much. Personally, the agents I'm working on, I'm using, actually, they're not agents. They're some kind of strange mixture of, so they're not standalone agents, but more like agents connected to Cloud Code or Cursor or what's not through MCP. Still agents though. So far, I prefer two of them. One would be Vercel SDK or AI or something like that, whatever they call it. And the other one, which I actually use most of the time when I don't need to support different models, would be simply Anthropic SDK or Claude SDK. I'm not sure how they call it. That's the one I prefer the most. I haven't tried the ADK. LangGraph is just too much for me. It's probably good if you want to. Depends how deep you want to go, probably. Okay, from Hobbits English. Bro, how to set up DNS bind 9 and ask, let's encrypt in order to trust our services sell locally. Now I'm working at home server. So I haven't used bind 9. I'm not sure what it is, but let's encrypt. Depends how you're running it. I always use it inside Kubernetes clusters. And in that case, I install Cert Manager, just takes care of it all, right? It's so easy. Cert Manager does it for you. Now, if the question is outside Kubernetes, honestly, I don't know. I haven't set any certificates outside Kubernetes for a very, very long time. If it's inside, Cert Manager rules. It's absolutely amazing. Okay. Oh yeah, I just remembered. Yeah, we have a sponsor like many of the episodes, and that sponsor is this time, like before, Octopus or previous Codefresh. It's just that before they were sponsoring it for the sake of trainings, courses they were providing. This time, the sponsor is still Octopus, but it's about enterprise support for Argo, right? By Argo maintainers. If you need any type of support for any of the Argo projects, Argo CD, Argo workflows, what else is there? Argo events, and probably one or two more. Then check them out, right? If your company needs support, real support, when things go wrong, you want to call somebody, and that somebody is not Ghostbusters, then try Octopus. They're really great folks. They know what they're doing. Check them out. And thank you, Octopus, for sponsoring this video. The link is in the description, by the way. So, or just go to Octopus. What is the address? Let me check. Where is the address? Octopus.com. Yes, octopus.com. Check it out. Awesome. Thank you for sponsoring this stream. And now let's go back to where we were, to your questions. By the way, start typing questions. I have only one question in the queue. If you don't ask questions, then I will close early, which is fine as well for me. So, hi, Victor, how are you? Let's say we have a backend API that is too big in general to give to the LLM as is. Would you write an MCP with a useful operation in it, or a SDK that MCP would call? So, before we get to MCPs, right, there is a whole art behind creating context that is useful to models, right? And you should never just dump everything you can ever imagine, like backend API. Let me just dump everything and let model figure it out. It might be able to, it might not be able to. What you should do is think really, really carefully. What is the context that will be useful to the model to give you the correct response, right? You need to figure out which data you need to give it, what is the format of data, which pieces of data matter, which don't, and so on and so forth, right? It's never about just dumping things. Now, and that answer is equally valid no matter whether you work directly in Cloud Code or Cursor, whether you wrap it up into an MCP or any third or fourth solution you can come up with, right? So think seriously about the context and how to generate the context you need. And when I say context, I mean there is user prompt, like, hey, I want this and that, right? There is a system context. That's what's baked into agents. And then there is the rest of the data that you should provide so that your intent, what you ask it for, is accompanied by that data, and that data is useful. I rarely come, if I do the context engineering right, I don't think I ever reach the limit of what what the model accepts, which is very often it's around 200K. And if you get to 200K, you're probably doing something terribly wrong or very, very complex. So you need to figure out which data to dump. Just don't dump data. Filter data, figure out. That's one of the reasons why MCPs I work on exist. And that's, hey, I have an MCP that will help you do something in Kubernetes, let's say, right? And for model to make the right choice, it needs specific schemas of specific resources, for example. Now, I could dump it all the schemas, but that would be just horrible. That would be bad, right? So there is a lot of code there that figures out where the data is, what the data is, which parts are important, and so on and so forth. So I use code to generate the data that is appropriate for the given intent, and then put that code into the call prompt, into the context, and then I send it to the agent, right? I do think that MCPs are very useful in that case, because if it's something repeatable, so let's say that people in your company, they often do something that requires, let's say, some information from wiki pages, right? Creating some sort of MCP that will figure out which data really matters, and then enhance that prompt. And then when it prompt is enhanced with just the right amount of data sent to the model and get the result, is very, very useful, at least in my case. Okay, from Dviyesh, I think. Current observability tools are ops-centric. Why don't we have anything developer-centric? Good question. I wouldn't say that we don't have anything developer-centric. I would just say that, ops tools are easier to sell when they're sold to ops people than to developers. So many companies focus more on the tasks or problems or issues that can be solved for ops people, simply because they're buying those tools. Developers rarely buy them. Nevertheless, it's not that we don't have anything for developers. We definitely do. There is Backstage, for example. There is Port. Crossplane is very developer-centric. After Ops do what they need to do, and quite a few others, right? So we definitely have tools. The real question is, or not the question, you can split those tools into two categories. And one is the tool useful to developers out of the box? And none of those that I mentioned are. When I say developers in this context, I mean application developers, right? Most of those tools I mentioned are not useful for developers from the get-go, from the start. That would be a different category. That could be, for example, Heroku, right? Heroku is very, very, very old. I think still it exists. Very developer-focused. Google Cloud Run is very developer-focused, right? Those are kind of directly third-party from vendors to developers. There is a much bigger number of tools that end up being used by developers, but after ops or other disciplines go through them first. That would be Backstage, right? So you would have or Crossplane or Port or many others, where usually ops people would define services, interfaces, what's or not, that are afterwards used by developers, right? And actually, you don't even need specific tools for that. Let me think of an example. Grafana, for example, right? Grafana is very ops-centric. But there is nothing preventing you or somebody to do it for you to create a dashboard that is focused on what matters to you as a developer, right? You can definitely do that in Grafana. You can do that in Datadog. You can do that in Kubernetes. You can create custom resource definitions that are very developer-centric, and you can do that with Crossplane, which is my project. You can do it with Kubevela, and so on and so forth. So there are definitely tools designed to be used by developers, but many of them are designed to be used by developers, but built first by ops. What else? No more questions. Oh, we're gonna close today very, very early. That's relaxing for me, probably. I'm going to give you like, I don't know, 20 seconds to type your questions. And if there are no questions, I go to do something else, which is also cool. So anybody, any other question I can help, I can answer, do something with, or any comment like, what are you working on? No? Quiet audience today? Okay, then. Okay, then I'm going to count to 15. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Oh, hey, one question. Okay, there we go. From Viesh. Go for it. You need to type it. Not only say one question. It would be so cool. I'm doing this from StreamYard. If I could see whether somebody is typing or no, I can't. So I don't know whether you are typing the question out, yes, or somebody. But anyways, I'll give you more time. Who knows? Maybe somebody wants to ask something. Anyway, you probably noticed I received a lot of, I will soon publish non-AI, few non-AI videos, but I'm so obsessed with it lately that most of my focus is somehow related with AI. I was very negative to it. Okay, let me try to Shamil, I think, probably. Anyways, can you suggest how to start writing cross-plane compositions? I mean, if you go to, I had a tutorial in form of YouTube videos and books, but I removed them because I haven't updated them since we published V2, which simplified quite a few things. Anyways, I mean, I'm not sure how to suggest. Crossplane.io is probably the best place to start, almost certainly. Either crossplane.io or wrapbound.io, one of those two. I don't know what to tell you. What I do know what to tell you is that you should probably start with YAML if you're just starting to get a feeling of how it works. But you should definitely not stay with YAML. I think that YAML is horrible for that type of task. What you should do after you get familiar, so get familiar by writing compositions in YAML. But then once you understand how it works, how it feels, and so on and so forth, you will probably realize that it's very inflexible. And I definitely recommend that, but only after that, you switch to a language that you prefer, right? Like all my compositions are written in KCL, which seems not to be maintained anymore. So I might need to rewrite them into something else. So choose a language that you prefer. It could be Go templating, which is what is used in Helm, Python, and quite a few others, right? And the reason for that is that you will, even though it might not look like that at the beginning, you will reach the point where static YAML does not cut it. Like you will need some conditional, you will need some loop, you will need some additional logic, and so on and so forth. And then you definitely should switch to a language of choice through functions. Crossplane supports almost anything. And even if it's not supported out of the box, you can easily add support by writing your own function. So I don't know what else to tell you, man. Start with simple, something like, usually people start with AWS bucket or something like that, which I think is silly. I like to start for something real, like simple application is a composition, right? That would construct a deployment service in Ingress or something like that would be a good start. So from Blixholm, about service mesh and identity-based access control, those allow applications using service accounts to have an internal identity that one can give access through the service mesh, correct? I suspect that there is a second part of that. Oh, yes, there we go. This allows a sub-NS access control, but is there really a security reason to go here compared to NetPols, given that you can just use any SA in the namespace for your deployment? I mean, whether there is a security reason, that depends on how paranoid you are and so on and so forth. Certain aspects of, first of all, I would not recommend people adopting service mesh lightly, because that's a whole new level of nightmare that you might experience, even though they look easy at the beginning. But if you do have a service mesh, there are some things that are no-brainer, like TLS between applications, right? Simply, apart from setting up service mesh itself, it's basically automatic. You just put a label or something like that, and that's it, right? You have TLS out of the box, you have identity out of the box. So if you do choose to use a service mesh, they almost come for free. There is a certain performance penalty, but it's almost negligible, right? And then there are some kind of other things that really require work and maintenance, and then you might start questioning how useful they are, and compared to the effort invested, like network policies, for example, can be a nightmare, and then you really need to think twice whether you really need it or not. From Shamil, all right, since KCL is no longer an option, what do you prefer now? Oh, that's such a complicated question, because it's so hard for me. I love KCL so much. It's so hard for me to pick, to be honest. And I'll be honest here, I still haven't rewritten my compositions from KCL to something else, precisely because I'm not sure what to pick. Like, I personally, I'm not very fond of Python. Go templating is a whole level of nightmare. I haven't started rewriting, but if I would have to pick right now, at this very moment, I will probably pick Q, right? Q is here to stay, most likely. I mean, you never know, but it's here to stay. It's a bit too convoluted and silly in some aspects, especially compared to KCL, but I like languages that are focused on data, right? That's why I don't like generic languages like Python for that specific type of task. So probably Q. That would probably my choice. More from Bigstone, yeah, but I guess the question is it worth it dealing with servers, etc.? I'm not sure I understood that part of the question, Bigstone. Are you running in Kubernetes or outside? I'm guessing if you say service mesh, that's probably Kubernetes. Is it worth it to install and run service mesh? If that's the question, I think that very often it's not. You should, most of the things you need, you can get from CNI, like Cilium. So from that aspect, it's not worth it. But if for whatever reason you already have service mesh, then yeah, enabling TLS and a few other things is definitely worth it. Q versus from Blixcon, Q versus JSONet, why not JSONet really? It's a personal taste. My head never really got to like, or my heart maybe, never got to like JSONet. I'm not even sure I can explain why. It simply does not feel right for me, right? I cannot say that it's bad, just to be clear. And also, I don't think that actually, it might be suffering the same fate like KCL. I don't think that many picked up on it, to be honest. Like Q, there is a decently big community and number of users of Q, but JSONet, I'm not sure. I think it's mostly Grafana folks behind it. Okay, from Dviyesh, if you have to troubleshoot any issues in production, then how will you do it? If logs, metrics, traces, and code, CI/CD, etc., are segregated, how about an observability platform for dev and ops both? If you asked me that before, so first of all, there is observability platform for both dev and ops, just to be clear. Any observability UI is both for dev and ops. Just like Grafana, just to go back to the previous example. I don't see why Grafana is more for ops and less for dev. In practice, ops create most of dashboards, And then devs don't use those dashboards because they are not really designed for them. But nothing prevents you as a dev to create your own dashboard over there, just as Ops did it, right? So like Grafana, I think it's equally for both. In theory, right? In practice, used by Ops, but I would blame devs for that rather, right? Now, and that's the answer from before. Right now, or very soon, I think that observability might be the best use case for AI, right? Because observability, excluding dashboards, which I think that they're silly in the first place, because dashboards are showing you knowns, not unknowns. It shows you the problems that you know that you might have. And then my brain is wired to ask you, okay, if you're showing dashboard with the problems that you already identified in the past, why didn't you solve those problems in different means so that it never occurs, that threshold in a dashboard and so on and so forth? Nevertheless, that's the best use case for AI, because it's observability is all about digesting relatively big amount of data, figuring out which parts matter and which don't, and then analyze those parts that matter, and then move to find some other data based on what you just analyzed, and repeat that process over and over and over and over again until you figure out what's really wrong. And that's something that probably of all the use cases I can imagine in software industry for AI, that's probably the clearest use case I can imagine. It's just a best possible use case for AI, to be honest, observability, right? We are not necessarily already there, because most of the vendors, companies that work with AI in that area just don't know what they're doing. And those that know what they're doing, they're not interested in that, because that's a relatively small segment of the industry. But if you're not there already, we will come very, very soon. Server CRD, Linkerd. To be honest, I haven't used Linkerd for a long time, since everybody moved to sidecar-less model, everybody except Linkerd. I haven't touched it, to be honest, so I'm not even sure what Linkerd is doing these days. It's, to me, it's I'm not going back to sidecar containers unless there is a very, very good reason for that. Luther, if you were starting with a project, what would your top choices for Kubernetes Gateway API project provider? Kubernetes Gateway API project provider. I'm not sure, to be honest. I haven't worked on. I haven't touched Gateway APIs. Actually, I'm always confused. Gateway API and API Gateway. I will assume that. I think you asked something other than what I thought. Are you talking about the replacement for Ingress, right? Because I'm always mixing Gateway API Gateway. If we are talking about the one that is replacement for Ingress, then Contour was my choice before. Now I have real doubts what is going to happen with that project now that VMware couldn't care less about Kubernetes. So I will probably have to also, that's one of the things that I need to rethink, if it's going to continue being Contour in my case or not. But it was Contour until recently, at least. From Jens, there is GitHub Receiver and GitLab Receiver for Auto Collector. I have been working on Azure DevOps Receiver too, so that you can extract DORA metrics. That's great, Jens. Absolutely great. From Shamil, about Crossplane, I recently switched to Control Plane V2, but had to replace all providers to Outbound with free plan. Are community providers no longer available? No, they're all available. They're all available. Then they're all disconnected completely from Upbound. So Crossplane as a project is in CNCF. Crossplane is publishing all those providers. Many of the people from Outbound work on them, but there are all the major providers are available as community providers as well. What I'm not 100% sure whether they appear when you go to marketplace.outbound, for example. I'm not sure whether they appear there, but they're definitely published and definitely available, simply because the official providers depend on them, if no other reason. So they're definitely there. From Jens, you should work on auto collector, Victor. There are too many things I should work on, so I never want to commit publicly saying yes, but maybe. From Connor, what happened with KCL? Simply, what happens with KCL happens with many projects. Dedicated maintainers are somewhere else now, right? So what happens with open source, and I feel that many people are not really aware of how it works, is that you have an open source project, sometimes started by a single person, sometimes by a few people. And at one moment when that project grows, it needs dedicated maintainers, meaning that not only people contribute every once in a while. When I have time, I will do something. When I have time, I'll do something else. For a healthy project to thrive, it needs to have one or more people who are basically dedicated to it, saying, this is my job. That's what I'm working on, right? And those people, and every single project has those people, right? And they're sponsored by some companies. Many of those people are sponsored by companies because companies have direct interest in those projects. Like in case of Argo, because I mentioned before, like we have Acuity that has maintainers dedicated to Argo project community version, right? Octopus or Codefresh people, Red Hat, and so on and so forth. So they're paying people to be dedicated maintainers on those projects because they have interest in it. And then there are some other projects where no company really has interest in it. But simply a company says, okay, yeah, kind of like we're going to pay your salary and you work on that project. And we don't care about that project, right? We have no interest in that project. And I feel that KCL falls into that category. And then the main person, I forgot the name, that was basically doing most of the work, dedicated to it, was eventually assigned to something else. I don't know what that something else is, but that person is not in KCL anymore. And then the random contributors are still there, but project cannot really thrive without dedicated maintainers, and that's what happened to KCL. Simply, whatever the name of that person is, or people in plural, they moved to work on something else. I said, yeah, Luther Ingress replacement. Yeah, okay, so I guessed right. That's such a horrible name. How well does N10 integrate with Kubernetes deployment? I never seriously used N10, so I don't know it that well. I don't like the idea of drag and dropping and so on and so forth. Simply, it's not the way how I work. So N10 never fit into my targets and my objectives and my ideas. So I don't know it well enough. I'm not saying it's bad. It's probably amazing. I just never used it deeply, right? I like to write code. I don't write much code directly. I use AI for that these days, but still write code. From Conrad, I really like Kong Gateway API implemented. Yeah, Kong is great, and Folks in Kong is great. Big recommendation. Till Deza, what else? Does it make sense to create MCP to provision resources in cloud like AWS? MCP would make Crossplane transparent. Developers would only need to ask for resources and PRs would just appear in Git. Yes, as a matter of fact, let me find. That's the project I'm working on right now, or very similar to that project. I will put it here in the comment. .ai or DevOps AI Toolkit. I mentioned in a couple of videos. It's still very green, but that's what I'm doing, kind of like it's an MCP where you can do quite a few things, and one of them is say, hey, I want to create a database. And then there is a dance between you using Cloud Code or Cursor and MCP, where MCP tries to figure out what should it do, how it should do, depending on what's available in cluster, what's not available, which resources are there, which CRDs, XRDs, so on and so forth. Ask you questions and guides you towards getting what you need. Check it out. But to answer your question directly, yes. I think where we are going, right? Kind of like give me a database, and then MCP or some other agent or something should ask you, okay, can you give me a bit more information? And then you say, I would like PostgreSQL in AWS, and it asks you, okay, cool, but how about this? How about that? Kind of almost like an exam on an appropriate level. And then when you answer all the questions, it analyzes what's available in your platform, whatever the platform is, and it gives recommendations as well. You can do A, B, C. There will be a video about that maybe in 2 or 3 weeks, so check it out. But the answer is yes. From Alexei, almost all of your latest videos are about AI tooling, but to be honest, I like the old videos a lot more. Thank you for that. I really appreciate it. I heard that from other people, to be honest, that they like my old videos more, and I get that. The problem is that this channel is not my business. It's more like my hobby. And my videos were always not about the topics that I think that people would want to learn or hear about, but always about the things that I'm working on outside of YouTube, right? So videos that I was publishing almost always are always a reflection of my work outside YouTube. And for good or bad, my work is now very, very much focused on AI. And to be more precise, very much focused on AI in relation to DevOps, SREs, platform engineers, developers, and so on and so forth, right? I have no other option, to be honest. I don't have enough time to come up with subjects and convert them into videos that are unrelated to what I work on. So for good or bad, I'm sorry, it needs to be AI right now. That's what I'm working on. But I fully understand that that's not everybody's cup of tea. That's perfectly fine. Konrad, are there any plans to do a video on using K3D or Kate's Gateway API? K3D, K3S is just so freaking fast for local development. I don't have any plans to do a video on that, to be honest, at least not in the next month. I almost never know what I'm going to do beyond the month in advance. So I don't have plans to do that. Yes, K3D, K3S is very, very fast. I might be wrong, but I think that they're not really maintained anymore or hardly maintained. So they're kind of, I might be wrong here. I'm not following them that closely. I think that they're kind of dead in the water. But if they work, and that's great. But no plans, near-term plans to explore them in a video. Sorry for that. From Rick, how easy it is to use Rancher across multiple computers in different networks, even across continents? You folks are asking all the questions about things I'm not working on anymore. I haven't touched Rancher for a very, very long time, probably a couple of years. So I don't know where Rancher is right now. Back in the day, I got very, very disappointed with Rancher for a couple of reasons. The main one being that RKE was a freaking disaster. It was horrible. And RKE2 is better, but still bad. And just as importantly, I was urging them. They do also some other silly things like cluster API, fork of cluster API instead of using directly cluster API was just a bad decision. But think back in the day, I don't know how it's now, that I feel that they missed is that I don't need really Rancher for one cluster. I need it for multiple clusters. And they never created some sort of interface that would allow me to work on multiple clusters at a time, right? Back in the day. I don't know how it's today, right? But back in the day, it's you need to go to cluster 1 or go to cluster 2 or go to cluster 3. And what I was hoping to get from them is, okay, so these are your clusters. Kind of like, would you like me to show you pods across multiple clusters? Would you like to filter them by the status and so on and so forth? I wanted a tool back in the day that would allow me to work on a fleet of clusters as one unit, and it didn't do that, and then I didn't see the point. I'm not a very UI focused person, just to be clear, so maybe that's why I dropped it. But what AI tools do you suggest? Using Warp and VS Code? I'm using Warp and VS Code. Yes, so I prefer, so if you're going for IDE, traditional one, I prefer Cursor instead of VS Code. At least, sorry, no, that was wrong. I really don't like Copilot unless it changed drastically last 2 months. I think it was the worst of all. Now, VS Code can use other agents, so there are dozens of them, depends which one you use. Nevertheless, I prefer Cursor over any of them, simply because Cursor together with the agent feels better than VS Code with whichever agent. The folks behind Cursor made that integration of VS Code, which is a fork of VS Code, to be clear, and agent more natural, more seamless. Warp is very, very interesting. There is only one thing that prevents me from using it, to be honest, and that's that it is neither IDE nor terminal for real. So I cannot, for example, if it would be terminal for real, I could start DevOps shell, which is what I use and which I believe it's awesome. There is simply no way to run my shell from Warp, whatever it's called, Warp. That's probably the thing that prevents me from using it, really. I would like it to be proper terminal, not kind of quasi somehow. But I really like what they're doing. They have some ideas that are really well done. I think that I don't like their interface, to be clear. But for example, and there are others, I really like that they are basically indexing and putting your source code into some sort of vector database so that agents have a easier time to find what they're looking for. For example, that's something that I'm not sure that others are doing, and it's really awesome. But if I go back to your question, which AI tools you suggest, if the question is agent, that's Cloud Code for me, heads down. Every once in a while, I go back to others, and then I always come back to Cloud Code. So yeah, assuming that you're asking about when you say AI tools, you mean agents, then Cloud Code. From Blixholm, where are you from? I was born in Belgrade, Serbia, but I live like 25, maybe 30 years already in Barcelona, Spain. So I have Eastern European accent, but I feel more Spanish or Catalan than anything else right now. I've been here for more than half my life. I'm very old. I know that was this question. Where are you from? There you go. From Shami, there is not much going on in DevOps landscape, so he switched to AI. That's actually true. There is a professional reason of what I do, and there is also, I'm trying to make professional reasons somehow match my personal interests, and there isn't much going on in DevOps landscape right now. Actually, there is much going. No, what you said. First, I don't agree with what you said. When you said there is not much going on in DevOps landscape, I don't agree with that. I think that a lot is happening in DevOps landscape, but that everybody now, all the companies, all the vendors, all the projects, or not all, but a significant percentage of them are trying to figure out how they can bring AI to their domain right now, right? And that applies to code development, that applies to doctors, to lawyers, to what's not, artists. And DevOps is not excluded from that. It's just that when you say not much going on in DevOps, if you mean DevOps as it was before, then the answer, I agree, yes. But I think that a lot is going on in DevOps. It's just that that DevOps is focused now on AI. Kind of how can we solve problems in a different way? Before we were solving, a long time ago, we were solving some problems with cloud. We were solving some other problems with VMs and with containers and with Kubernetes and so on and so forth. And it all goes in waves, just like almost until not long ago, almost everybody abandoned in ops space, whatever they're doing, and jumped into Kubernetes, and not much was going on outside Kubernetes, but it's still solving similar problems. And same thing is happening in DevOps. It's just that now the solutions are focused on how can we solve problems using AI. That's the focus of almost all the companies, including where I'm working right now. More from Shamil. Let's say that I want to provision a few GKE clusters in GitOps manner. What should I use, Crossplane or Cluster API? Crossplane has two parts. One that is somehow similar to Cluster API. The first part is that you install what we call providers that install CRDs and controllers in your cluster to manage something like AWS, right? And then you would have a CRD so that you can create custom resources for EC2, for VPC, for subnet, for Podsonot, right? And same thing for Azure, Google Cloud, and so on and so forth. So it extends your Kubernetes cluster with additional resource definitions to manage additional types of resources, right? And you can say, you can define in YAML or however you want, VPC, EC2, subnets, what's or not, EKSs, whatever you want, and push them to Git, and then GitOps will synchronize them. But more interesting part about Crossplane is what we call compositions, and that's that you create your own CRD and say, and you can call it, let's say, database in my company, and you define what is the input for that schema, like, hey, whenever somebody in my company wants to create a database, we should specify the region and the provider, for example, and the name, etc., etc., etc. You define your own schema interface. And then you define when somebody creates a custom resource based on that schema, what should happen? Oh, we should do this or that, right? Oh, we should create RDS and some internet gateway and blah, 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 right? You define everything that should happen when somebody creates a custom resource. And if you do that, if you go to that level, then your GitOps stays the same as always, right? GitOps is all about, hey, there are some Kubernetes resources in Git. Can you make sure that they are synchronized into the cluster using Argo CD or Flux, right? Or whatever else. So the story stays the same, except that with both Crossplane and Cluster API, you extend the capabilities of what that cluster is so that it can manage additional stuff. And then additional thing on top of that, with Crossplane, you can create your own interfaces, your own CRDs and controllers. But GitOps story stays the same. Push something to Git, Argo CD or Flux will synchronize it into cluster and continue synchronizing it forever and ever. From Conrad, can one still use open source LLMs with Cursor? At this time, I have moved to Z editor built on Rust and Gemini 2.5 Pro or Flash. I think you can. I'm sure that you could. At least I haven't used, checked that part in a while. But if I recall correctly, yes, you can configure it to use basically almost any model, including local ones, right? Now, to be honest, I'm not I'm not convinced that that's a good idea, at least not for all use cases, because if you use open source LLMs, and I'm assuming when you say open source, you mean I want to run them myself. Either you will have very, very low performant models that are significantly worse than top tier models like Sonnet or Opus or Gemini or what's not. Or you will need to start creating your own cluster for inference, right? If you want to use really capable big models, then that's not your laptop, right? That's a serious setup in a company, and you can definitely do that, right? If you can manage to buy all the TPUs you need, but it becomes complicated. So either you're using bad models, not bad models, but not really good models, and you run them on your laptop, and that's fine. But then the outputs you're probably going to lose more money through bad interactions with AI than what you would save from not paying credits. Or you need significant infrastructure to run inference yourself on big models, right? I suspect that will change in the future, that those models start becoming so much better and smaller at the same time, that we will be running them on our phones, but that's not today yet, right? Gemini Flash, for example, that's a good example of a relatively capable model. It's still not good, especially if you compare it with Gemini 2.5 was probably the best model when it appeared, and today is probably the worst model, just to be clear, until we get Gemini 3, and that's changing every few weeks, right? Gemini, best model half a year ago, worst model today, right? Flash is amazing because it's extremely fast, but not that good. It's a bit worse than Gemini 2.5, which is not good either today. From Till Indesa, have you checked Copilot CLI? Yes, I checked it when it was released. I haven't tried it like last couple of days, maybe a month ago. It was so horrifyingly bad. It was. I think that Cursor should be ashamed for releasing it that early. It was really, really, really bad. Like, I couldn't make it. I couldn't set. Like, here's an example. I could not, back in the day, I couldn't set up MCPs in Cursor CLI without opening Cursor ID, which kind of defies the purpose, right? You like one or the other, that's fine. But the saved prompts, like, what Cursor calls Cursor rules, did not work. I don't know whether they work now, and it was disaster. I don't know how it's today. Also, I can use open source LLMs with Z out of the box. Great. Actually, really great. So Gemini CLI is pretty good with very generous usage limits. Yes. Gemini is probably my second favorite coding agent after Claude Code. It's pretty good. Really, really good. I just have a slight preference, not big one, towards Claude Code. And I definitely have preference towards Sonnet, especially now with Sonnet 4.5. And just to be clear, this is today. Tomorrow, Google will release Gemini 3, and it will be great, or it will be disaster. We'll see. But if it's great, then I will say the same. I will switch back to Gemini. We'll see. But right now, not as good as. So I'm always thinking in terms of combination. Claude Code with Sonnet, especially Sonnet 4.5, since maybe 2 days ago, and even Sonnet 4 beats Gemini CLI with Gemini models until Gemini 3 comes, and then we'll see. Shamil, thank you very much. You showed me a push to GitOps 3 years ago. This was mind-blowing. Oh, thank you for saying that. And we are no more questions, which is ideal, perfect timing since we are at the top of the hour. I hope I need to check my calendar, but probably see you all next week. So nice talking to you. See you all next week. Cheers.